Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to come out of politics, and in this video I'd like to return to the meat of Trump's economic policy, his trade war with China. Now, I've already discussed on the channel the advantages which China has in this trade war and how it has been preparing for quite a few years now. But now I'd like to take a look at the early reaction and why China will still think that Trump is going to be the one to have to blink first. But first, for daily news and commentary, please hit the subscribe button to stay notified. So, huge trade war between the USA and China. Not easy for either side to back down from this one without it being obvious they've backed down. Yes, diplomacy is the art of letting both sides look like they've won to their own public, so you get agreement. But there's not really a lot of diplomacy going on in Trump's America right now. China, of course, has more motivation to weather the economic storm than Trump. First of all, Trump started it. So the Chinese public will realise that their country has to put on a show of strength, even if it means an economic squeeze. After all, what happens if China backs down? America wins. China will become weaker. So obviously it's going to have to take a bit of pain in the knowledge that it's not their fault. They didn't start it. Second, China is not a liberal democracy. So there's a greater level of cultural conditioning to sacrifice for the state than in America. Americans will not necessarily respond well to being told to suffer sacrifices for the sake of a trade war their idiot president started. As this began, Trump thought China had a bad hand. In reality, he is the one playing with the pair of twos. He can keep going. He can keep upping the ante and bluffing in the hope that China backs down. But in this trade war, there's one huge similarity, one huge difference with an actual game of poker. The similarity is that the longer this goes on, the more it costs the UK economy. Chinese economy too, of course, but they can absorb the pain more easily. And as I said, they didn't start it. The difference is that in this tariff war, everyone can see everyone else's cards. So it's not very easy to bluff the strength of your hand, only how long you are willing to keep raising the stakes. But with no inflection point where things suddenly become easier for the United States and harder for China, there's no incentive for Xi to be sweating it. And if we're going to compare this situation to a game of cards, it's worth remembering that Trump managed to bankrupt 2 casinos, businesses which are not easy to get permissions to set up, partly because they are a license to print money. Unless, of course, you're an idiot. And it's not even like Xi just has to wait this out. If he decides to get impatient or just feels the need to embarrass Trump, he can squeeze export restrictions even tighter on essential minerals for America's pharmaceutical and defense industries. Trump was this week once again blaming Zelensky for getting himself into a war he couldn't guarantee winning. These sock puppets still failing to explain to him who is actually driving the war. But Trump really should be taking his own general advice here. He actually did start a trade war with the whole world, really, but really went for it against China. What was his plan for victory? Just sort of hoping everyone surrendered, as far as I can tell. This seems to be exactly like Putin's plan to invade Ukraine and hope the government fled the country. Only didn't quite work out that way. Nor is this trade war working out for Trump. Had he talked to any experts on US-Chinese trade, he would have been told just how weak his position was. Yet again, Trump demonstrates that despite having the resources of the most advanced state in the world, he is letting all of that skill and expertise gather dust. And in terms of this game of trade chicken, the evidence is that it is America blinking. First of all, in these early days of this trade war, it's very much Trump who is sounding the most desperate. He keeps saying on camera to journalists, oh, China wants to deal, China needs a deal, China needs to call him. China, on the other hand, isn't really saying very much at all. They're just reacting to the trade war with the tools at their disposal and talking to other countries. And they've still got to activate some of their biggest weapons in their arsenal. So we have Trump, on the one hand, publicly calling for China to speak to him. The reaction from China is more like this. Perhaps Vance was unwise to refer to the Chinese people as peasants. And Chinese memes seem to be emphasising this made in China quite heavily. The implication being that Americans will not want to do without their Chinese products, and so will have to do a deal sooner or later. Then there was the statement from the chair of the Fed, making it clear that Trump's tariff policies are not helping with jobs or the cost of living. So the head of the central bank basically telling the American public that, you know what, if jobs are lost and eggs get even more expensive, that's very much down to Trump's policies. Also a bit of a hint that Trump may not be getting the interest rate cuts that he wants. Then Trump has forced an export block on Nvidia for some chips to China. So he's screwed billions of dollars, about $5.5 billion, worth of exports for an American company and for a product that uses raw materials that come from, China. So Trump's move on Nvidia is either not going to be a big deal for China, in which case all he's done is widen that trade deficit he keeps whining about. If it does bother China, they can always respond by saying, oh, you don't want to supply the chips, then you don't need the raw materials either. Then, of course, there was Trump's exemptions on computers and smartphones. Never mind Trump talking about putting special tariffs on them later on. In the here and now, he's exempted them from the massive 145% rates. Now, if you were looking at all of these things from the point of view of the Chinese government, would you be thinking of trying to find a face-saving way out? No, of course you wouldn't. It's going quite well from China's point of view. I mean, even the way in which Trump rapidly escalated those tariffs against China was beautiful. If you're convinced that Trump is going to be forced to back down sooner or later, you may as well make it as humiliating as possible for your opponent. I mean, it would have been, if Trump had have just applied, say, 40% tariffs to China, you could slowly eat away at that and get it back down to where it was, which was above zero anyway. Not so easy from 145%. Not so easy to climb down from 145% without hurting yourself. Trump has been saying this week that the other Asian countries shouldn't deal with China because they won't treat them right. Now, okay, yeah, China isn't generally about mutual benefit with trade either. But they're not the ones threatening 50% tariffs and wanted to close down all their factories. In fact, China builds factories in those countries, supplying jobs. Trump is actively wanting to take those jobs away. Which of the two are these other Asian countries really going to want to deal with? And it's not just that China seems confident that Trump will have to back down. It's not even like Trump is given an air of confidence in return. See, the situation here could have been that both sides are confident of being in a winning position and the rest of us are just watching to see which one's right. That's not the case. Trump is actually the one who keeps saying, oh, China needs to deal. China's got to have a deal. China needs to call me. Why isn't China calling me? Has China called me yet? China hasn't called me yet. Why hasn't China called me? China's not saying that Trump should call them. They're ignoring him. It's pretty clear that in the last week, one government is confident and the other is getting nervous. And all of this is just what we can observe over the past week. It doesn't include all the other assets which China is likely to be able to draw on, which are still matters of speculation right now. Alliances, for example. Rory Stewart in his podcast was making the point that if Trump wanted to undermine China's trade policy, he would need allies. After all, there are valid criticisms of the way China does business, which Trump could have made. But to deal with it, he needed allies who agreed and would work with him. At the very least, he would need the EU on his side. But Trump has made the EU enemy number 2. But that is another advantage for China, which has not yet come into play. China has already been approaching the EU. So the situation for China is that the evidence so far is that America is sweating, and they know there are future events which are also likely to be in their favour as well. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe for further content. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for memberships. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.